Welcome to the Open Metaverse podcast. I'm your host, Mehdi Farouk, Senior Tokenomics Analyst at Animoca Brands. Today, we'll be talking all about NFT trends and what's in store for NFTs in year 2023 and themes to look out for. On the other side of the mic, I have Teng, who is a Delphi analyst and produces amazing content and research on NFT and as a NFT specialist. Welcome to the Open Metaverse podcast.
Hey, Maddie. Thanks for inviting me. Really excited to be here to chat about NFTs, and I think it's going to be a great episode.
Absolutely. So, Teng, tell me about your crypto origin story and how you got into NFTs.
Yeah, sure. So I first got into crypto back in, or at least I first knew about crypto was probably back in 2017, right? I was pretty much the class of 2017. First encounter was with Bitcoin, was with Ethereum. I think at that point in time, it was just a curiosity. Seeing like number go up on some of these assets made them particularly interesting. Um, and yeah, basically just wrote that up, wrote that down. And I think when we went into the bear market, pretty much was focused on other things. And at that point in time, I was pretty much working on a healthcare data analytics startup that a few people and myself like started. And then I would say probably it was sometime in 2020 where I started to see things moving, right? There were a lot of things that were going on in the space. There was a lot of noise. There was a period where the whole DeFi summer came about. Went through all of that, participated in a number of different projects, thought it was really interesting. And then I think at some point in time, something probably clicked in my head. And as I understood what was going on in the space, what was going on with this technology, what the potential of this was, a part of me was convinced that this is going to transform all these different industries beyond just finance in the next like 10, 20, 30 years or so. And I knew I needed to align myself like really deeply in the space. So I started spending a lot of my time just being in the space, talking with people, listening to podcasts, consuming all this different content. And I think it was probably at the late part of 2020 that I first got into NFTs. And I think the first project that first NFT I bought was this collection called Non-Fungible Apes. It was this like mimetic collection where they actually created like ape like characters of various celebrities like Donald Trump, Kanye West. And I thought it was really funny. I thought it was really interesting. I bought a couple of those when they dropped. And clearly it all went to zero. But that was my first interaction with a token that had different forms of rarities and that were tied to financial value because people were actually trading these things like back and forth. And I thought it was really interesting. And that led me, I guess, really down the rabbit hole of NFTs. And after that, I think the art stuff really started to take off with art blogs. There were a lot of derivative projects that were going on. A couple of months later, there was a large Beeple sale for 69 million that went on. And I think like it's everything that's happened so far in the last 1 year in NFTs has just been very, I would say, both unexpected and also very interesting, and that really I think piqued a lot of my curiosity, and I haven't gotten out of this rabbit hole ever since I went down there.
Makes sense. So Teng, you did mention healthcare and data analytics. That's what you were working on before this. Were there any transferable skills or unique skill set that got transferred over from that aspect of your life to crypto now?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. It's something I've been thinking about for quite a bit, and I would say that initially I had a couple of ideas about how we could actually apply like crypto blockchains in the healthcare space. But I think the healthcare space is probably a little bit too early for really sustained implementations of this technology because it's just a very conservative space. I think the main takeaways for me was having spent like the last 6-7 years working in a tech startup, it gave me a much better view on how startups work, right? And if you think about like many NFT projects today, essentially, even though they may be like PFPs, but essentially they run like startups. They have a roadmap, they have a product that they are building out, they have users, and so it helps me to sort of like think through what are some of the challenges that these companies, or I guess like these projects might actually face in actually building a sustainable business. And it also gives me I guess a better sense of like what like product cycles are like. How long does it actually take to actually launch a mobile app? How long does it take to launch a game? I think it's given me a little bit of idea of how some of these things work. I think the AI part is also very interesting because I think we're seeing a trend of this generative AI come up. I'm personally very fascinated by all of this. It's something that I do want to spend a lot more time diving into it. But I also think it's going to make a very big change in terms of how we do certain things in the coming years.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on the AI bit. Only on the NFT side, but also on fungible token side. I believe the one mental model to view crypto is like a API call for money, and when you have artificial intelligence agents who will need these API calls for money in a trustless way, I think there will be amazing use cases that will build. Right now, we were all operating with human to human transactions, but in case of AI, we will also need like a trustless layer, and they can like natively call the APIs through their own algorithms. So over there could be interesting applications as well.
Well, that's quite fascinating. Like, I mean, let's hope the AI doesn't take over everything that we do, like eventually one day. But it's definitely very fascinating.
Yes, and the few projects out there that are actually like experimenting with this. I remember Altered State Machine is one, Alethea AI is one. There are
Yes.
few games that are also kind of experimenting with this. So there's definitely something to keep an eye out. So Teng, in terms of the themes you saw in 2022, NFT themes, like what were some of your theses, basically thesis that you were surprised by? I know you wrote a huge report, an amazing report in Delphi surrounding these around these themes. Maybe you can like walk our audience through that.
Yeah, sure. I would say like the first thing that kind of caught me by surprise through the year of 2022 was what happened with the Solana NFT ecosystem. Um, I think firstly is because NFTs first started on Ethereum, right? And most of the more like older OG NFTs projects like CryptoPunks, POAPs were all on there. But I think some point in time, probably in the later part of like 2021, we started to see a small, very engaged community of NFT traders, founders actually start to take root on Solana, which is pretty unusual, I would say, like unexpected, because like Solana was actually designed as a chain that would be transformative for finance, right? By having like very fast and quick transaction speeds, able to do thousands of TPS. It would actually be great for many of these like future financial products we built on Solana. But didn't expect like a very unique and flourishing NFT ecosystem to actually develop on it. We've had quite a number of very prominent like influencers and founders like Frank Digots, which is basically the top NFT project Solana right now, even though is moving to Ethereum and Polygon. But that highlights how wild of a ride it actually has been for Solana, because while it had a very huge growth, like even through the early parts of the bear market last year, I think the number of transactions on like Magic Eden would just growing on a day by day basis. We also saw that there was a very big collapse, at least in confidence, after the FTX situation, because FTX and SBF were actually very big patrons of Solana. And when all of these things happen, I think it caused a lot of people to think about like whether Solana really has a future without these two people. But I think what we've seen since then is that these communities, even though they experience a very big drop both in prices as well as interest, they've actually bounced back pretty well towards the later part of last year. And I think the NFT ecosystem on Solana is still thriving pretty well. So I think that's one thing that definitely was very interesting to see. I think the other thing that I found particularly interesting was the whole situation with creator royalties on these NFT marketplaces. If we think back to the start of 2022, I think like everyone thought that royalties were there to stay, right? I think no one really questioned why we have to pay royalties, and I think one of the reasons was that actually royalties was people viewed it as actually an innovation, and it was a way for artists, creators to actually build, um, to be able to continue to fund their work without having to continuously sell new items and new mints. And that actually drew a lot of interest from creators, and was probably one of the reasons that brought a lot of interesting, talented artists into this space to actually experiment and use NFTs. But sometime in I think it was July of last year, we had like SudoSwap launch, and it's basically a new marketplace which used a more AMM type of model, but they didn't have creator fees built into this. And then we started seeing other marketplaces um, jump on the bandwagon. We had X2Y2 started to say that, okay, we're going to make royalties optional. And then a few other marketplaces like LooksRare also followed along the way. I think it was only OpenSea that stood steadfast in saying that it's going to support creator royalties all the way. And since then, over the last couple of months in 2022, there's been a lot of, I would say, directional shifts. Like people would say X2Y2 support basically had optional royalties, but then I think they recently implemented royalties again, right? So I think everyone's still trying to figure out what's going on in this whole space, whether royalties are here to stay or not. I think it is going to continue to be challenging because it is difficult to really enforce royalties in a way that's still in line with the open, permissionless philosophy that we have on blockchains and with NFTs also. But I think it will be interesting to see how this continue evolves through this year.
What do you think is the end game for these NFT marketplaces? Like, will there be royalty, no royalty? Like, in terms of your mental model, what are you kind of seeing?
I would say that I think there's going to be a wide variety of different kind of marketplaces with different kind of user bases as well as fee models. I think in a very big picture point of view, we're probably going to see a little bit of bifurcation, where I think we're going to see a number of marketplaces that are very creator friendly, and they will continue to find as many ways as they can to ensure that these creators will receive the royalties that they actually want. And there will be a good number of people, especially, for example, in the art space, in the music space, that these are basically collectors who actually don't mind paying royalties, right? Because basically the reason why they buy these NFTs is because they want to support the artists. They want to support the works of these people that they believe are talented and they enjoy. So that's, I think, going to be one side. So there's still going to be marketplaces that will continue to have royalties and enforce them as much as they can. At the same time, I think we're also going to have newer marketplaces that will try and come in and reduce fees as low as possible in order to draw new users to them. I think these appeal to the much more trader kind of mentality among users. So we're seeing things like Blur, which has come in, and a lot of trading volume has actually shifted to Blur in the recent weeks because it does allow certain collections to be traded without royalty fees paid. And if you are an NFT trader and you're buying things just to either for their investment potential or to make a profit, then you definitely don't want to be paying royalties. And these people will tend towards these marketplaces that will charge the lowest fees.
Awesome. I think this is what was also mentioned in your Delphi report. One of the segments within that report, you delve deeper into 5 NFT themes that you kind of foresee for the next year. I would love for you to walk us through those themes. Perhaps also share your screen and give something to our audience visually for them to kind of comprehend, like, what do you expect going ahead?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would love to do that. So let me just share my screen and we can talk through a couple of these interesting themes. I'm actually just pulling out this report that we actually recently wrote that's titled The Year Ahead for NFTs. So let me just scroll down. It's a pretty long report, but I think what I think is most interesting for everyone here is to talk a little bit about what we see as some of the major themes around NFTs for the coming year. And I'll try to outline some of our thinking behind these different things. So the first thing is really I think we're going to see a very strong growth in NFT finance. Um, and basically, NFT finance are basically tools that actually unlock a new level of utility for NFTs. It basically allows NFTs to be borrowed, about them to be loaned. It allows NFTs to be traded as derivatives. And I think this is a very nascent but interesting growth sector that is actually developing around the whole NFT industry. And if you look at what happened in 2022, as you can see from this chart over here, we actually saw a very huge growth in the usage of NFT loans, where in the start of 2022, there was probably only about 50 million in cumulative loans taken out on NFT lending platforms like NFT Fi as well as Bendao. But by the end of the year, we're probably hitting over 500 million in cumulative loan volume, which is more than 10x like what we had at the start of the year. So I think this is really laying the foundation for a lot of NFT finance products to actually start to take off in the coming years. I do know of quite a number of interesting projects that are going to be launching. I think the
Do
one
you have a
sector within
pick?
NFT.
Do you have any
Do
pick
I have
from
a pick?
this, or maybe some of the new NFT finance project launching ahead that you find fascinating?
Oh yeah. Okay, I think the one that I found the most interesting is actually a protocol that's called NFT Perp, and this basically allows you to trade, basically allows you to buy, um, allows you to I guess I speculate on the prices of NFTs, right? So basically, what it means is that if you think the price of Bored Apes is going to go up, you don't actually have to fork out like 80 ETH to buy that full Bored Ape. But basically, you can buy a part of it, and basically, it functions as like perpetual futures that we see in the more traditional markets or so. And the more interesting thing is that you can do it reversely as well. That means that if you think the prices of Bored Apes are going to go down, you can actually short it and actually profit from prices going down. And this provides actually a way for even owners to, for example, hedge some of the exposure. And I think I was looking at the charts of this NFT perp recently because it's currently in private beta. I think it hit like 28 million or so in volume over the last, I think, 6 to 8 weeks since it's been live, which actually does show that it's quite a bit of interest that's going around on this. Whether the design is sustainable, I'm not sure. I haven't delved deeply into whether it will be able to withstand like certain stresses when at certain market conditions. But definitely, I think it's one to watch out for, and we're going to see more similar kind of protocols launch.
Yeah, I think these perpetual based derivative types projects will be very fascinating, even in terms of getting an investment exposure. Because if you think about it, in a bull market, people can take leverage and the volumes will increase, and these protocols can accrue value. But even in the bear market, which we have seen NFT marketplaces as taking a hit, 80%, 90% downfall in terms of volume, people would still use these platforms to hedge their risk. So perhaps the volume goes down, but it doesn't go down to a similar degree. So kind of thing, these types of protocol could be slightly more anti-fragile relative to NFT marketplaces. So, Tank, apart from the NFT finance and perpetual and derivative products, what else do you see in terms of NFT themes?
Yeah, Mehdi. I think the next thing, which I think is pretty interesting, which I'm just going to scroll down a little bit here, and this chart probably tells the story quite well, is that we're going to see what I call a great unbundling of like NFT marketplaces. If you look at NFT marketplaces, I think these are pretty much the crown jewels of the industry because they're able to generate huge amounts of cash flows. And so there's very keen competition in the space. And just if you look at this chart over here, you can see at the beginning of last year, January, February, OpenSea was pretty much the dominant marketplace with like over 90% of all NFT trading volumes going through it. But towards the later part of the year, NFT volumes overall have come down a lot. But more interestingly, you can see like many other marketplaces like Rare, X2Y2, Blur, and even Magic Eden have actually come up to challenge like OpenSea's dominance in this place. And I think what we're going to continue to see through 2023 and the years ahead is that we're going to see like big platforms like OpenSea continue to see market share to newer NFT marketplaces. And this really follows the history of many other. I guess if you look at other successful like internet marketplaces outside um, of the crypto space, we can actually see a very similar kind of like history or trend. For example, the one I always like to bring up is like Craigslist. When it came out, basically it was very general marketplace. You basically could post like classified ads on every single sector. But over 10 or 20 years, we start to see like very verticalized like marketplaces start to take over a lot of it. For example, like real estate listings on Craigslist now are pretty much like succeeded by Zillow, which has a much more interesting and user-friendly interface for this. And we can see it across like all these different sectors and in the tech space. So I think the same thing is probably going to happen in the NFT marketplace space as well, where some of these like newer marketplaces that have a very more specific focus. For example, it could be art, it could be virtual lands. They're able to build a much better user experience for the users, and that's how they start to actually disrupt and start to take away market share from some of these larger incumbents by being able to build these better experiences. And we know that the marketplace that succeeds is basically the marketplace that makes its users as happy as possible. I think that's going to continue to play out through the year. Even I think we've even seen like projects themselves actually launching their own private marketplaces. For example, ApeCoin DAO launched its own marketplace for the Bored Ape ecosystem because basically it allows them to have a much better control over fees, control over the economy of the NFT ecosystem. I think that's going to be a trend that also continues to happen over the coming year.
Absolutely agreed. I feel apart from the value accrual side, even from the user experience side, right? Like let's say when we talk about real estate, like digital land, OpenSea's interface is not 100% conducive to that, right? Like we need something where similar to Zillow, right? Like we can navigate on the map in terms of coordinate where my land is. So all of these and different types of NFTs have different nuances and creates different user experiences, which I think at the moment is difficult to kind of bundle everything together in OpenSea. For example, with music NFTs, right? Like you need some structure similar to kind of Spotify and things like that, which OpenSea cannot provide since it has a lot going for themselves. Yeah, this makes total sense.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Like, I mean, the buying experience, like, say, if I was someone who was buying, say, expensive piece of like contemporary art, I think it's very different from, say, someone who's buying a PFP or the Bored Ape or so. And the kind of things that someone looks for is also very different. And so I think being able to build these like very unique and customized experiences for users, I think is going to be one of the key battlefields, I think, in the
Cool, cool.
coming years.
That being said, I still remain bullish on OpenSea. I feel like people will still use OpenSea as like a curation and front page, but then also explore verticalized marketplaces and their own marketplaces because you still want that initial discovery and then afterwards value accrual to your own marketplace. Awesome. Let's look into the theme number 3.
Yeah, sure. So if we look at the third theme, I'm just going to scroll down to pull this out. This is one that I'm actually particularly excited about. And what we're going to see is we're going to see like very strong tailwinds towards the adoption of NFTs. And this is really going to come from both big tech companies as well as big brands. Um, I think it's really interesting. Like this graph was particularly exciting to me. And this basically shows the monthly active users across some of these like large social media and tech platforms. Like with Facebook currently leading, has more than almost 3 billion users. Instagram has about like 1.5 billion users, and most of these tech platforms are starting to embrace or at least explore the potential of NFTs within this platform. For example, we saw that Instagram recently partnered with Polygon and a few other blockchains to allow creators to mint, buy, and sell some of these NFT collections. One of the biggest success in NFTs this year was Reddit's digital collectibles, where basically they allowed their users to actually create unique profile pictures, and each of these profile pictures was actually an NFT. And I think what's most interesting was that they were actually able to create an experience where the users didn't even know they were actually minting an NFT and actually had created a wallet for them. And I think that's where big tech today is very good at. They are very good at making great user experiences. That's where they have honed like years and years of expertise, and it's really exciting to see them start to bring in more of their, hopefully, I mean, at least a percentage of their users to understand more about blockchains, more about crypto, and more about NFTs. And I think that's going to be one of the big drivers towards a slow and steady march of mainstream adoption within NFTs. I think the other thing that's also quite exciting is really seeing some of these, scroll down a bit, seeing brands actually start to get into NFTs as well. Over the past year, I think we've only seen a couple of, I would say, very forward-thinking like companies, particularly Nike, with their acquisition of Artifact, that actually have got into NFTs in a very meaningful way. But they have actually been able to produce substantial actually revenue through these NFT sales. I mean, a lot of it happened in the bull market, so I think probably it's unrealistic to expect like other companies to replicate the same level of like success and revenues, at least in the early stages. But it is substantial. And I think like what has happened is definitely going to draw a lot of eyes around this. And I think like almost every major brand today probably is already thinking around what is Metaverse or Web3 strategy is going to be. I think a lot of them are taking very intentional steps, not just wanting to launch like a simple collection, but rather building something that has a more engaging customer journey and roadmap that they can bring their customers onto that. And I think that trend is going to continue to go ahead through the year, even if we continue to experience a little bit of, I guess, a bear market in the rest of the sort of like crypto space.
Is there any one big brand that you're very excited about, at least what they're thinking about their strategy or have implemented some?
I think there are just so many of these things. I think one that I've seen quite a little bit of interest around is actually the sports brands. I think we've seen like, for example, like NFL, NBA, Top Shot actually release stuff as digital collectibles. But now I think based on the people that I've talked to and the projects that I've had interacted with, quite a number of, like, say, sports clubs and some of the biggest brands in the world, for example, clubs like, say, AC Milan, from a football point of view, they actually really thinking deeply about how they can do this. And I think there's a very strong use case for some of these. I remember someone I was talking to was telling me that, I mean, he works closely with some of these brands in the English Premier League sports clubs, and he was saying that some of the clubs they had like a billion fans or so, right? But they only able, I mean, the monetization, they probably only getting like, say, less than $1 per fan that they actually have. And I think like NFTs have the potential to help them to monetize some of these fans, grow their brands in a bigger way, and help their fans be more engaged and participate more closely in the whole ecosystem. So I think that's one thing I think is going to be quite exciting in the coming year. On the fashion side, definitely, I think that's just there's just so much. I think like every day I'm seeing like new fashion labels launch a new experiment or product in the sort of like fashion metaverse kind of space, and we can talk about that later.
Yeah, hold that thought. I'll
Oh,
I'll I'll,
cool.
I'll dive deeper into it in a bit as well. So what do you think will happen with you mentioned a lot of sports brand coming in. What will happen in terms of intersection between social token, fan token, and NFTs? Do you think they'll coexist, or do you think NFTs will kind of slowly become the de facto social token or a fan token? Like, what are your views on that? Because there are a lot of interesting platform out there that are focusing on fan token, but might want to pivot down the
Yeah,
line to NFTs.
that's actually a great question. It's really in line with one of the next sort of like prediction that we are um, looking at actually to play out in the coming years is that we do think that like NFTs are going to be the next version of the social token or the fan token or the creator token, whatever we might call it. Um, and I think in the last couple of years, we've seen like a lot of experimentation with more like fungible tokens. Like we have projects like Chili's that does these like fan tokens for various sports clubs, but they're all mostly fungible tokens. But I think NFTs have the potential to be much more rich, right? Because with NFTs, you can actually tie various media, you can tie images, you can tie videos to these things. And I think naturally it makes for much more um, I guess it makes for better like user experience, especially when you're talking about things like token gated access, token gated content. It's a lot more clunky to say that okay, I have to own like say 1,000 of these like fungible tokens in order to get access to a Discord group or access to certain media. But by saying I own this like membership NFT, I think it's a lot more interesting, and you can do a lot of cool things with it as well. Like for example, with NFTs, you can actually introduce like certain like gamifications or like mechanisms. For example, if you are a very or engaged member or contributor within a particular creators economy, you can actually, for example, they could make the NFTs dynamic where you actually level up your NFTs, metadata changes, you get a much more cooler, a much more rarer kind of NFT. And I think that really appeals to a lot of the psychology behind people who are fans and participating in these things, because it's really there. You want to be able to have something that you can flex, you can actually show off. And I think fungible tokens are necessarily the best way to sort of like flex to other people because they're not as visible as before. So I think we're going to see a very huge wave of creators, celebrities, brands starting to launch their own sort of like social tokens. And I think the one that was the most I guess like interesting was basically the Donald Trump like NFTs that were just launched like 2 weeks ago. I didn't expect that. That came out of the blue for me. I didn't expect Trump to actually launch his own like NFT collection. I think it saw quite a bit of its own controversy. But I think it does show that really like everyone has a potential to launch something, and we're just going to see a lot more of these coming up.
Absolutely. So you did mention Trump NFT collection. One thing I want to explore with you is your top five favorite NFT collection. Perhaps you're bullish on, or perhaps you just find interesting. And why do you find them interesting, or why you're bullish on them?
Yep. Um, that's a difficult question, but I'm going to try and just name a couple of things that I think are interesting. I mean, definitely not financial advice, but I think like these are projects, not necessarily from the price wise, but basically they are actually doing interesting things that I would definitely continue to follow through the year. I think firstly is definitely the Yuga Labs and the Board Ape ecosystem, and I think it has cemented its place as like the number one NFT ecosystem right now for a reason, right? I think like Yuga Labs has a huge war chest. It managed to raise like $400 million, and is able to fund itself to do many interesting things for quite a number of years. Recently, it also announced that it's going to bring on a new CEO who was previously the COO at Blizzard Activision and was very deeply involved in some of the top games in the world, like World of Warcraft. So I think they're going to be very exciting, very interesting, exciting things ahead. And I think the thing that makes me the most bullish about the ecosystem is that just the people within it, right? The community of Bored Ape and related NFT holders, they're just fanatics, right? I mean, they may be degens, but they just absolutely love what is going on and what's happening. And this evident by the strong, I guess, performance in some of the NFT prices over the last 2 weeks or so, where though some things were, markets were uncertain and unsteady, but basically the floor prices for these things were actually just going up and up and up after the whole FTX fall. So I think that's one I'll keep an eye on. Second, it's a community that I'm probably a little bit biased towards because I own one myself. It's basically the Azuki. I think like the Azukis have is a PFP project as well, but it has the potential to be the board apes of the Asia world, and it's seen a very strong take up and engagement from the Asia community. Um, where I'm based here in Singapore, there are lots of people who hold Azukis, and I know in many other countries in the region as well. They're all pretty excited about what's going on, and I think despite the controversial past that the Azuki founder Zagabond had, um, I think what they have done is they have been, if anything, they've managed to build a very engaged community of people that are just constantly excited to be around each other and are creating new things. So I'm excited to see where this continues to go. I would say another one that I'm actually waiting out for and excited to see what goes on for them is another PFP is called Doodles. They launched also about a year ago, but they have been pretty quiet, I would say, over the last 6 months. But I know they're going to be launching their what they call like Doodles 2, which is basically their plan to make their NFTs more accessible to the mainstream audiences. And I think that's one of the biggest challenge that many of these like PFP slash brand projects face, because like um, they have like say 10,000 NFTs, right? 10,000 board apes or so. And it's not easy. You can't become a mainstream brand if your number of holders is very limited to say 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 people. Because if you want to really go mass market, you need to have something that's appealing to say millions of people, because that's the kind of numbers that actually really matter. And so I think Doodles is trying to do that, where they have this like original NFT collection that will still be limited edition, but they're also going to sort of like allow people to create or release like more mass market cheaper versions of these doodles that will be more accessible to a larger group of audiences. And I like that the whole art and the vibe behind Doodles is very family friendly. Like it's something that really appeals to everyone from all ages, from kids to adults to seniors. So I think it does have a chance to become like one of those like brands that actually potentially go mainstream. And that's probably one of the thesis that I have around NFTs. Let me see. I think two more just very quickly. I think I would like to say CryptoPunks. I think CryptoPunks, um, it's to me, I mean, a lot of people call CryptoPunks as PFPs, but to me, I think of them as like historical relics, like something like artifacts that you might find in a museum. Because I think the main thing that goes for CryptoPunks is that it has its historical provenance. It was really like one of the first like original like PFP type NFTs was actually created like by now it's probably coming to 6 years old. We've seen a lot of holders actually are basically like OG crypto people. They're using them as their profile pics. It's very unlikely they're going to be selling their CryptoPunks. And even though CryptoPunks doesn't have any roadmap, it's still done relatively well, even throughout and the whole bear market. And I think what's going to happen is that people are just going to people are just going to continue to collect these CryptoPunks and hold them for a very very long time, because they have something that other NFT projects can never take over, which is basically the brand and the historical provenance. And I think the final one that I would say it's for me, I'm still struggling with this, but I think it's something that is worth watching. Is really the Digi Daigakus that were launched by Gabby and Limit Break. So as a quick context, Limit Break actually raised like $200 million, which was an eye-popping amount like last year. And basically they raise funds basically to launch a game studio with the hopes of developing the next like $1 billion plus revenue game in Web3. So basically, they released this collection called the Digi Daigakus, and they have this model where they call the factory NFTs, and basically they intend that they're going to continue to airdrop more NFTs to this factory NFTs. But I think the most interesting thing is that firstly, I think the game. I mean, at the end of the game, we need to see how the game actually goes. The game is still actually in development, and it's very hard to predict how a game actually gets taken up. But I'll be excited to see how they go. And the second thing, which I thought was very interesting, was that they actually said that they're going to do this very big advertisement during Super Bowl, which is just about a month away from now, and they're going to do a very big mint, and it's going to be the first like Web3 project that has ever gone such a big way from an advertising perspective. So will be pretty interesting to see whether any of it becomes sticky, or actually whether it brings more users into the space.
Great selection, Ten. Uh, Again, we are seeing a lot of experimentation in within the NFT space. One recent experimentation is around Web3 reputation and identity. I know you also wrote a piece on that. So perhaps you can share your views on that. Maybe perhaps share some of the project you're bullish on, or you're at least keeping an eye on, or if you have any visuals for us, we can also have a look at that.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you're perfectly right, and thanks for bringing that up. I think decentralized identity and reputation is something that I was exploring quite a bit towards the later part of last year. Um, I think it's something that we definitely need to continue to strive towards. Like, I think decentralized identity is really is a core component of the Web3 stack. And by decentralized identity, we mean that you as a user actually owns your identity, and you can take that identity everywhere you want to, which is important because if you look at today, for example, let's say if I create a identity, say on like Facebook or something, right? Like if Facebook shuts down, then it's gone, right? I can't take it out to any other platform. Also, if I want to do it, I want to establish my reputation again in a different platform. I basically have to start from scratch all over again. But the ideal of this is that you actually own it, and it follows you right along the way. I think identity is going to be very important in Web3 because today, um, one of the challenges is that we don't really have a lot of information about users. Basically, we know people's like wallet addresses. We can see certain financial transactions, but what do people like? What are people's hobbies? What are people's preferences? These are things that we actually don't have today, and that's the promise of what all these like projects that are building in the decentralized identity and reputation space are actually looking to do. They're looking to help to build out a bigger, richer picture of individuals in a way that is decentralized, that you actually own that, and you actually can. And I would say it's open and permissionless in the sense that anyone can build upon some of these like reputation credentials that you have obtained or are given. So I think things that are particularly exciting to me, I would say like one is really around like say credit scoring, right? Like say your a combination of some of your offline data as well as your on-chain transactions can actually help you to create a certain credit score that maybe allows you to take a larger loan from a DeFi protocol in the future. Or I think the other thing is also in gaming, which is I think reputation is a very big thing for gamers. Like what sometimes what drives me to continue to play a game and want to get as good as it as possible is so that I can climb to the top of these leaderboards and people know me as say one of the best like League of Legends players or so. And that reputation has a very big part to play in both the design of games as well as driving users to continue to be engaged in some of these game loops. So I think all of these things are in play. The challenge is that it will take time. I think from everything I've seen in the decentralized identity, decentralized social reputation sort of like space is that there are a lot of good people that are building stuff in it. It is quite a fragmented space overall. And I think there's still going to be quite a bit of time that's needed for people to actually start to adopt and use these products because there aren't really very good like industry standards that allow people to actually build on these things with confidence yet. A lot of these protocols are either still in private testing and have not launched publicly, or have launched publicly but are still trying to sort of like find their footing around some of these things. if I were to say like maybe like one or two protocols in this space that I think have done pretty well. Definitely, I think one is POAP. I think that's something that, I mean, basically it's proof of attendance, right? Basically, if you attend a certain thing, you can actually collect some of these like collectible NFTs that show that you were part of you were there at a certain location, or you were part of a certain meeting and group. And I think POAPs have done really well because they've actually been able to make it a lot more mainstream and accessible than a lot of these like crypto native protocols today. So I think they, yeah.
Yeah, one
Mm,
problem I have with POAP, even though I love the project, is majority of those
mm,
NFTs are not soul bound. So people do farm
yeah.
it, people do sell it to farm credentials or certificates or to get a future airdrop. So
Yeah,
what are your
hundred
views on
percent.
that?
Right. I think it is definitely it's definitely an issue, right? Once you can transfer these NFTs, then you cannot be 100% sure that a particular person was the real original owner. I think there's probably still ways to filter out for these things. For example, you can say that, if an NFT was transferred or sold, maybe you exclude it from whatever you're using that POAP for, in terms of maybe your reputation scoring or airdrops or so. But it's definitely I think I remember hearing a podcast where one of the POAP co-founders was asked the same question as well. I can't remember what his exact reply was, but I think he was saying something about like it wasn't really something they worried too much about. It was not yet on their roadmap, and they wanted to just get as many people as possible on this thing. But yeah, I can see it potentially becoming an issue in the future.
Maybe if not soul bound, at least they should explore
Mm.
verifiable credential. So if a verified entity is issuing those, there's a way to kind of not sell it on OpenSea, or at least have it in a wallet, but it's verified by the institution. But apart from that, you can't do anything. So let's say Tang, if you're issued POAP, entity can verify it was issued to Tang rather than, let's say, Mehdi. So if they don't go on a soulbound token route, at least they can like think about verifiable credentials.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think it's also interesting because um I mean there are also problems, right? Once you have something that's soul bound, I mean if you lose your wallet or something like that, then you just lose everything. Like I don't know. I feel like there's still a lot of issues that needs to be worked out in this whole identity space. So that's also one of the reasons why I do think that it's not necessarily going to be a huge team like in the immediate months, but it's more of like a multi-year kind of like thing.
So Tang,
Mm.
what are your views? We touched upon this earlier. What are you seeing with metaverse fashion? Perhaps also give us some of the projects you found fascinating recently. I was also advising few metaverse fashion projects, and one of them also featured in your report
Mm.
called BNB. So yeah, just walk us through what are you seeing in that.
Yeah. So I think metaverse fashion is particularly interesting because one, it's been pretty much under the radar in terms of like NFT verticals, right? When we think of NFTs, we first thing we think of are things like arts, music, PFPs or so. But actually, when I was doing this and when I was working on this report, I actually realized that actually a lot of very vibrant communities that are forming around fashion. And I think like fashion is probably heading towards also um, two sort of like slightly different directions. Like one is the fully digital fashion, which is basically um, I guess the thesis is that a lot of our lives and more of our lives are going to be spent in the metaverse in things like perhaps the sandbox or the central land in the future. And because we're going to be spending a lot of time there, we're going to need clothes to wear, right? We want to differentiate ourselves. We want to differentiate our avatars in these different not game, I guess like metaverse worlds. And we want to be unique. And so that's what's driving a lot of it in the digital fashion space. Um, and I think the other angle that to think about like fashion is actually I think phygital. And I think it is my view is that I think phygital is probably going to take off much faster than digital fashion. And by phygital is really the combination of both like physical and digital, which means that let's say if I buy a particular piece of clothing from a store today, which I can wear on my physical self, but I also get access to the same piece of clothing that I can use, say, on my digital avatar, or that might by buying that clothing, I might also get an NFT that unlocks a lot of like interesting like token gated experiences, like AR experiences, or so on. And I think there's a lot of experimentation that's sort of like happening in this sort of like digital space also. So I think these are sort of like two sort of like angles that these like communities and founders are going towards. Um, I think digital fashion is particularly interesting because it really unlocks a lot of like creativity. We're seeing a lot of like designers that previously were struggling in, I would say, the more physical fashion design world, actually now start to find their footing in sort of like creating some of these like digital clothing, digital designs, which actually allows them to express the full range of their creativity because they no longer have to be bounded by, say, the laws of physics and so on in creating all their different designs. So I think definitely something to watch out for. I think a lot of it will also depend on how the whole metaverse narrative takes off. Like whether do we really spend a lot of our lives in these like very immersive virtual worlds. I do think I am personally a more in, I I think we will like in time. Um, Maybe not as quickly as some people might think, but I feel like it's something that will definitely sort of like happen. Yeah, so I think the most prominent like fashion related sort of like project is probably Artifact, the one that Nike acquired, and they've done quite a number of like digital fashion based sort of like drops, which honestly are very cool. I've thought about buying a couple of these like um, customized sneakers myself, even though honestly they are very overpriced, I mean, compared to what you might buy in the stores today. Um, I think like there are quite a number of like these like digital fashion houses. I guess that's what they will call themselves. Things like the Fabricant. Um, they are sort of like how do I say, like they're working with like digital designers to sort of like create these pieces which either they sell or they work with, say, prominent brands who actually launch as like sort of like partnership arrangements or so. So I think overall there's a lot of activity. I think the people within the whole space itself are excited about it. Yeah, I think like G Money himself is also very involved with his 9DCC fashion label, which is sort of, I think, branded as like crypto native fashion for crypto people like you and me. So, excited to see that take off.
I'll try to get him on the pod then.
Oh yeah, oh for sure. I'm sure he'll be a great person to interview for sure. He's lots of amazing views.
And also, if you look at traditional metaverses, right? Second Life, IMVU, a lot of money is generally spent on dressing up your avatar and the cosmetics of your avatar. Even recently, Fortnite, like a lot of money is spent on skin. So people do really care about how you dress up and what you represent in that metaverse. So from that standpoint, identity, fashion kind of like converges and and
Yeah,
it becomes very interesting. So, for example, with Second Life, people like spend a lot of money on the skin color, skins, different type of body formation, as well as what clothes you're wearing, and that avatar then actually becomes a PFP on the forum. So there is also this amalgamation of identity, cosmetics, and then profile picture. So I think there's
yeah.
definitely something there. My view is more towards digital metaverse. Like I'm very
Okay.
bullish on digital side of things. Phygital, I still want to see how it all pans out.
Yeah, we got to get
Uh,
you some of those like digital like this Nike AR hoodie stuff and and get you converted to a fan of digital. But absolutely right. Like I'm fully with you. Like I think one very strong tailwind as well is that a lot of these like skins in all these different games like Fortnite, they are being bought by a much younger generation. Like these are the like Gen Zs, like Gen Alphas, who really understand. I think from a young age they understand the power of digital assets. They've been playing these games. A lot of people have told me that their kids, when they will ask like what they want for the Christmas presents, they actually want one of these like skins rather than actually a physical item also. So maybe one day we'll see that like digital items actually become much more valuable than some of these visual items itself. And I think this could be really catalyzed when this like younger generation starts to grow up and become very economically productive and have a lot of disposable income and money to spend. I think that's when all of this will really take off in a very, very big way.
Agreed. So, Tank, we are in the last segment of the podcast where I'll ask you some rapid fire
Sure.
questions. Uh, so, what do you hope Web3 will look like in 10 years'
What
time?
do I hope Web3 will look like in 10 years' time? Okay, I think that's very interesting. I think my ideal like kind of world is that at that time we don't even think of it as Web3, right? We just think it's just become such a seamless part of the internet that is expected that like almost everything we interact with, like anything that I buy or any game that I play, these things that I these items that I collect, these are all like NFTs, and I don't even need to refer to them as NFTs or think about them. Technology is so integrated in the entire system, and it's just a part of the internet.
Who's your favorite person to chat? Who's your favorite person to chat with about Web3 and NFTs?
Yeah, that's um I mean I think there are lots of people like definitely within the Delphi um some of my colleagues like they're just such giga brains on the whole space, particularly on the gaming side, like people like Pierce just know so much about like the history of gaming and what the future might be that it's always enjoyable to hear what their views are. I think a lot of like some influencers that I do follow on the space as well. I like Vincent Van Gogh for his artistic sort of like views. I think DC Investor has also had very great insights around like how the NFT space will sort of evolve. So always enjoy like seeing what they are saying.
I was definitely taking notes for next case. Tang, how is an NFT analyst different from a fungible token analyst specializing in a particular crypto sector?
um, I guess what I would say is that I think with fungible tokens, a lot of it comes down to economics, right? I think supply and demand is the key thing to understand and model out. I think the same thing applies for NFTs as well. It's just that NFTs introduce a new sort of like element to this whole space where having, I guess, a keen understanding of like culture, having an understanding or knowledge around some of these different areas where NFTs are used for example, knowing the history of art, knowing the history of music or gaming, helps you to also understand where NFTs might go. And then I think the third thing is just I think I'm not sure if this is good advice as well, but it's just I think just being able to um, enjoy the moment and have fun because like, NFTs I feel like there's a certain crowd of people that are really into it, and these are usually either um, people who are a little bit more unconventional or don't take themselves too seriously, or so. And I think being able to also understand that and vibe with that, I think helps you to be a lot more involved in some of these different NFT communities and really understand like what people are thinking, how do people think about, how do owners think about the NFTs that they actually hold. So those are some thoughts.
What's your pet peeve in crypto?
Pet peeve in crypto. I think the thing that still very irks me a lot every time I see like news like this is I think there's still a very big like lack of transparency in the whole space, especially NFT projects. Like honestly, like most of your favorite NFT projects, they can actually just route you at any time, and we've seen a lot of it. I think like just like maybe just a week ago, there was one very prominent like YouTuber who also put up a note saying that he basically gambled away all the community funds in his project and he's going to shut them down. So I think like every time I see these news, I just get so frustrated. Like I think we need to do more, like both as community members as well as like team members to really ensure that people don't take our space as like a circus or a laughing stock. And we need to really do more to show that we are serious about building a new, better world.
What's your favorite meme?
What's my favorite meme? Like, when you ask that, like, I think the first one that comes to mind is basically the dog sitting in this house that is burning all around it. And I feel that for much of 2022, I was basically like right in the middle of this meme. But I'm hopeful for 2023. I do hope that we get out of this and it's going to be a much happier, happier world ahead.
Love it. Love the answer. Love the answer on that meme. Tang, it was great having you. Before we conclude the podcast, uh, What should I have asked you, but I didn't?
Let me think. I think we basically covered everything. I think we talked about so many different things here, from NFT finance all the way to PFPs and stuff. Um, yeah, I think there's really not a lot more to say. I'll just say that I'm personally like super bullish on NFTs. I think like the whole sector, the sector as a whole, is just going to be going up and to the right only. And I'll just say, like, let's be patient. Things take time to play out. But everything I've seen so far, like, people are just building so many amazing stuff, and we're going to see how these things play out soon.
Thank. It was lovely to have you on the Open Metaverse podcast. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Maddie. Yeah, it was great having this chat. Like, it's not often that you get like to have these like long form kind of like chats just about everything in such a fun manner. So, thank you so much for having me here. Really enjoyed it.
This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice. Any opinions provided in this podcast reflect the views of the speakers only.